They say time heals everything, but time never healed the day my world turned silent. I was just a boy, small feet covered in dust, running behind my mother through the tall grass. Her laugh was the music of my mornings. Her voice told me the world was safe. Until the morning when the air changed. I still remember the look in her eyes when the strangers came. It was not fear, it was something deeper. Like she already knew what was going to happen. They didn't shout. They didn't run. They just pointed, and suddenly, I wasn't holding her hand anymore. I screamed, but my voice got lost in the wind. That was the last time I saw her. The look in her eyes never left me. It comes back in dreams, in the silence of the night, in the shadows of the fire. I've lived a whole life since then, but I'm still that boy, standing frozen, staring at the place where she vanished. That's why I'm telling you this, not for me, but because some stories weren't meant to disappear. I still remember the color of that morning. It was golden. The sun filtered through the leaves like honey dripping from the sky, and the ground beneath my feet was warm, soft with the scent of earth and ash. I woke up with my mother's voice humming, something I didn't understand, but always made me feel safe. She was cooking, her hands moving fast, her feet tapping lightly. I ran to her like every morning, hugged her leg, and she smiled down at me. I was her shadow. Wherever she went, I was there. That morning, the village was quieter than usual. Adults whispered. Eyes moved differently. The air was thicker, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. I didn't know fear yet. I didn't know what it meant to lose. I just knew my mother's arms and the rhythm of her voice. Then came the birds, not the usual chirping, but a loud sudden flutter that made my mother stop stirring the pot. Her body stiffened. She grabbed my wrist, not hard, but Furman told me to stay close. Men I had never seen before stepped through the trees. They didn't speak our language. They didn't smile. One of them pointed. That was it, no shouting, no warning, just a finger. And then everything exploded. People ran. Some fought. Some froze. My mother turned to me. Her face was calm. Too calm. She cupped my face and looked deep into my eyes, like she wanted to memorize me forever. I didn't understand. I was confused. She kissed my forehead, then pushed me toward the trees, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I saw her get pulled away. Her hand stretched out toward me, her mouth moving silently. That was the first time I heard silence louder than sound. I ran. I don't remember how far. I just remember the burning in my legs and the taste of dust. Someone picked me up, I think it was one of the elders. They carried me like a sack of grain, and I kept looking back, but she was gone. The colors of the forest weren't golden anymore. Everything had turned gray. I didn't cry, not at first. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I just sat, staring at nothing, trying to hear her voice again in the wind. That day, something inside me broke. Not loudly, quietly, like a crack in the center of a drum, invisible. But it changes the sound forever. That was the day I stopped being a child. I didn't know what slavery was. I didn't know what they would do to us. I only knew that my world had ended without fire or blood. It ended in a look, in silence, in the way my mother let me go with her eyes before her body was taken. People often think pain begins with chains, but for me, pain began with that morning when the sun was golden, and then it wasn't. It's strange how memory works. Some things fade even when you try to hold on to them, but others stay with you no matter how many years pass. I can't remember the sound of her voice anymore. I've tried. I close my eyes. I listen to the wind, the rustle of leaves, the crackle of fire, hoping it'll come back to me, but it never does. But her eyes, Her eyes never left me. I see them every time I close mine. I see them in reflections, in puddles, in the night sky when the stars blink slow. That day, when the men came and everything turned upside down, I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew that something was wrong. I felt it in my chest before I saw it. My mother knew it too. I think she had known for a while. She used to glance at the edge of the forest more often. She used to sleep less. She held me longer at night. Maybe she was waiting for the moment she couldn't stop. And when it came, she faced it the only way she could, with dignity, with pain, but with something more powerful than fear. I remember her reaching for me, pulling me close. Her hands were shaking, but her grip was strong. She knelt down to meet my eyes, and for a second, the world stopped. No screaming, no chaos, just me and her. She looked into me, not at me, not around me, but into me, like she was searching for something or giving something. And in that moment, I felt it, like she poured her entire soul into my small body, like she was passing me a torch I didn't know how to hold. I didn't cry, I didn't speak, I just stared back, confused. Then her eyes changed, they widened, not with panic, but with urgency. She kissed my forehead fast, like it hurt to do it, then turned to face them. She didn't beg, she didn't scream. She looked back at me one last time, and in that look, she said everything. She said she loved me. She said she was sorry. She said she would never stop searching for me, even if she never found me. She said to survive, not with words, but with that look. And then they took her. They dragged her away, and I ran after her. But someone held me back. I kicked, I fought, I screamed her name until my throat was raw. But she was gone. I never saw her again. But her eyes followed me through every night, every hardship, every beat of the sun on my back. Her eyes were there. I imagined them in the stars. I imagined them in the fireflies. I imagined them behind every locked door. They became my guide, my compass. When I wanted to give up, I saw her look. When I forgot who I was, I saw her look. It wasn't a look of defeat. It was a command. Live. Remember. Tell. I didn't know it then. But that was the moment I was marked. Not just as someone who had lost, but as someone who had witnessed something sacred. Her last look was my inheritance. Not land, not name, not freedom, just that. And that was enough to keep me going. It still is. I didn't know what an ocean was until it swallowed me. We walked for days, maybe weeks. I don't know. The sun never stopped burning and the nights were never long enough to rest. My feet bled, but I stopped feeling the pain after a while. I only looked ahead when I had to. Most of the time, I kept my head down, watching the ground move under me like it was trying to run away too. When we reached the shore, I thought we had found the end of the world. Water stretched farther than the eye could see. I had never seen so much of anything in my life. It should have been beautiful, but it wasn't. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace, only warning. The ship waited for us like a mouth held open, ready to swallow more than bodies. I remember the smell before I even got close. Salt, sweat, wood, fear. That's what the ship was made of. They put us in like we were things, not people. No names, no questions, no mercy, just space. We weren't supposed to speak. We weren't supposed to move unless told. And when we did, it was like we disappeared into each other, one big body of breathing and waiting. That was the beginning of the silence. Not the silence of nature, but the silence of stolen futures. No one cried out loud. We were beyond that. We cried inward, into the walls of our own minds. I tried to remember my mother's face, but her features started slipping away like fog when you reach for it. I clung to her last look like a robe. I would close my eyes and see her eyes staring back at me, steady, strong, and I'd hold on. I started counting the days, but I lost track. Quickly, the ship didn't move like the earth. It rocked and groaned like a wounded beast, and we were trapped in its belly. No sunlight, no fresh air, just the slow passing of time and the sound of our own breathing. Sometimes someone would stop breathing. They'd be there one moment, gone. The next, no one said anything. We just moved a little to fill the space. That was the rule. Keep moving, keep surviving. Don't look too long, don't think too much. I started to forget my own voice. I started to forget I had one. We were shadows of ourselves, drifting in the coffin that floated. I used to dream of running through the trees again, hearing my mother's voice call my name, feeling the dirt between my toes. But even my dreams started to sink. The silence was stronger. It crept into my thoughts, wrapped around my memories, and threatened to make me forget everything that mattered. That's when I knew I had to remember, even if it hurt, even if it was easier to forget. I held on to the pain like it was all I had left that proved I was still human. Because in that silence, they tried to make us ghosts. They tried to erase us before we reached land, but I refused. I whispered her name every night, even if only in my mind. I promised her I would not disappear, that her son would not be turned into nothing. I kept that promise then, and I keep it now. If you're hearing this, and if something inside you still listens, subscribe so this story doesn't vanish with me. When we finally touched land again, I thought maybe the silence would end, that maybe the earth would recognize us and speak something kinder. But the world we arrived in didn't see us. We were there, our bodies real, our skin burned, our spirits bruised. But the people around us looked through us like we were made of smoke. I was still a child, but in their eyes, I was already nothing more than hands, feet, back. They didn't ask my name. They didn't care where I came from or who I had loved. They looked at me the way someone looks at a tool before picking it up. I remember standing in a line, surrounded by others who had survived, but none of us looked at each other. We were too afraid of what we'd see in the other's face. Some were shaking, some were silent, some didn't even blink anymore. A man walked past us slowly, examining each of us like we were objects on a shelf. His face had no softness, only calculation. When he reached me, he lifted my chin roughly and stared into my eyes. For a moment, I stared back, but not with strength. I was numb, hollow. He let go of me and moved on. That was my welcome. That was the first time I realized I wasn't supposed to exist as a person anymore. I was to become a function, something to be used, directed, pushed, ordered. The place they took me to had fences, but they weren't to keep things out. They were to keep people like me in. The house stood tall in the distance, but I was kept far from it. I slept on the floor, under something that barely counted as a roof. My first night there, I didn't sleep. The stars were hidden by clouds, and the wind carried no voice I recognized. Everything was strange. Every sound was unfamiliar, and the silence that had followed me across the sea was still there, wrapping round me like a second skin. The people who worked beside me were older, but they moved like they had forgotten how to live. Their eyes looked down. Their hands worked fast. No one spoke unless forced to. We weren't allowed to talk freely. I kept waiting for someone to say something kind, to ask me how I felt, to remind me I was still a boy. But no one did, not even a glance of pity. I began to understand. We were all wearing masks, not of our choosing, but forced upon us. The ones who looked at us saw only what they wanted, obedience, strength, silence. I learned quickly not to show pain. If I fell, I got up. If I bled, I hid it. If I cried, I did it silently in the dark, biting down on my own tongue. The hardest part wasn't the work. It was the invisibility, knowing you were there, breathing, aching, remembering, and none of it mattered. I used to wonder if the trees saw me, if the wind still knew my name. Sometimes at night, I would close my eyes and pretend I was back under my mother's arms, hearing her heartbeat, smelling the smoke from her cooking fire. But then I'd wake up and it would all vanish, like mist. I was beginning to forget what love felt like, what safety felt like. I became small inside myself, shrinking a little more each day so that the pain wouldn't have so much room to grow. They told us we were lucky to be alive, but I started to question what kind of life they meant. A life without choice, without voice, without even the comfort of being seen. I started to speak only to myself. Whispers in my mind, prayers to a mother I could no longer picture, promises I didn't know how to keep. I told myself over and over, you are real. You are not what they say. You are not invisible. But it was hard, so hard, because even when people looked directly at me, I knew they didn't see a boy. They saw a shadow, and worse, I was starting to believe them. There came a day when I looked into the water and didn't recognize the boy staring back at me. He was taller, thinner, darker from the sun, and his eyes had stopped searching for kindness. That's when I knew I had changed, not just grown but shifted, like a branch bent too far and never straightened again. I had stopped speaking unless spoken to. I had stopped asking questions. I did what they told me because I learned quickly that disobedience was punished not with shouts, but with silence so cold it burned. The man I was given to, the one who walked past me that first day, he didn't hit often, but he didn't have to. His silence was enough. It erased your name without saying it. He never looked at me twice. I wasn't worth a second glance. I became part of the background, moved when ordered, disappeared when not needed. The clothes they gave me didn't fit. The food barely kept me strong, and the roof over my head leaked when it rained. But what hurt most wasn't the hunger or the cold. It was how quickly I became invisible. I could scream in my mind, cry in the dark, break down inside, and no one would notice. I didn't have a name anymore. Not the one my mother gave me. They called me something else, short, easy to shout. I hated it, but I answered, because if I didn't, someone else would pay for it. I started to forget how my mother said my name. That scared me more than anything. I began working before the sun rose and didn't stop until it fell. I learned to move quietly, to be useful but never noticeable. I became a shadow, not just to them but to myself. I stopped hoping she would come back. I stopped believing that I would ever be free. Dreams felt like lies, and lies got people killed, even if only on the inside. The only thing I held onto was her eyes. That look, I've said it before, but it's true, it was all I had. I kept it hidden, like a secret stone inside my chest. No one could take that from me. They could change my name, beat my back, steal my childhood, but they couldn't erase that one moment. It became my armor. When I was too tired to stand, I remembered how she stood tall. When I was about to cry, I remembered her eyes full of strength even as they pulled her away. I never told anyone about it. I never spoke about her. I was afraid the memory would fade faster if I tried to explain it out loud. So I kept it close, and it kept me alive. Some of the others broke. I saw it happen. They would wake up one day and not get up, not because their bodies were finished, but because something inside had gone quiet forever. No light left in their eyes, just ash. I didn't want to become one of them, so I did what I had to. I worked like a ghost, ate like a prisoner, slept like a fugitive, and I listened to the wind, to the trees, to the firewood cracking anything that reminded me the world still moved beyond the fences. Sometimes, on rare nights when no one was looking, I would whisper her name to the stars just to prove I still remembered that I hadn't been erased completely, that I was still someone. I don't know how many years passed like that. Seasons came and went, but my life stayed the same. Repetition, obedience, survival. I forgot birthdays. I forgot the shape of laughter. I forgot how to speak without permission. But I never forgot that I was more than what they saw. Even if I couldn't prove it, even if I couldn't speak it, I carried it deep inside, quiet and burning. I was a shadow, yes, but a shadow still tied to a light they could never touch. As I grew older, the days began to blend into each other, like grains of sand falling through my hands. I no longer knew how many seasons had passed or how many moons I had seen, but every evening, when the work was done and silence returned, I would sit alone by the fire, and I would leave a space beside me, an empty place where no one else was allowed to sit. That space was hers. I never told anyone why I did it. They might have laughed, or worse, pitied me. But I knew that chair, that patch of earth, that absent sit belonged to my mother. I imagined her there, even as her face began to fade from my memory. I tried to hold on to every detail, the way her hair curled around her ears, the lines at the corners of her eyes when she smiled, the sound of her voice when she called me in the morning. But time is cruel. It doesn't ask what you want to keep. It takes what it wants. Still, I refused to let her go completely. That chair was my rebellion, my proof that she existed, that I existed, that once, before all of this, we had been more than property, more than labor, more than silence. Sometimes I would talk to the empty space, not loud, not with words, just thoughts that drifted into the air like smoke. I would tell her what I had seen, what I had felt. I would tell her I was still here, that I had survived another day, that I hadn't forgotten her. And in those quiet moments, I almost believed she heard me. The others noticed the space, I think. Some would glance at it but never ask. Maybe they had their own ghosts to sit with. Maybe they understood without needing to speak. We all carried people who weren't there anymore. Some from the ships, some from the fields, some from memories too painful to name. But for me, it was always her. I waited for years. I watched the road, the horizon, the sky, hoping that one day I would see her walking toward me, that she had escaped, that she had never stopped looking for me either. I imagined her older, like me, with silver in her hair, her back a little bent, but her eyes still strong. I imagined what I would say, or if I'd be able to say anything at all. I imagined running to her, falling to my knees, and feeling her hands on my face again. But the years passed, and she never came. Deep down, I knew she was gone long ago. Maybe that very day, maybe later. I would never know. But I couldn't stop waiting. It became part of who I was. That empty chair wasn't just for her. It was for the part of me that still believed. The part that refused to let the world take everything. Because when you've lost so much, sometimes the only thing left to hold on to is a hope that makes no sense. A hope that keeps you breathing even when nothing else does. I aged slowly and all at once. My hands grew stiff, my eyes dimmed, my back curved under the weight of time. But every evening, I still made space for her. Even when I couldn't stand straight, even when my fingers trembled, even when I was the last one sitting by the fire. Some of the others called me stubborn, some called me crazy, But I didn't care. They didn't know what it meant. That chair wasn't empty, not to me. It was filled with everything I had lost and everything I refused to let die. It was filled with memory, with love, with the echo of a voice I would give anything to hear again. And even now, as I sit here, older than I ever thought I'd be, I still turn to that chair and wait. Not because I think she'll come, but because part of me still needs her too. Because in a world that tried to take everything from me, that empty chair is the only place I still feel whole. When the word came that we were free, I didn't feel anything. Not joy, not relief. Just a strange emptiness, like standing still after running for years. I was already a man by then. My back had bent under years of weight, and my eyes had seen too much to believe in miracles. I remember the way they said it like it was supposed to fix everything, as if the chains disappearing from our wrists would suddenly erase what they did to our hearts. But freedom didn't come with healing. It didn't bring back the ones we lost, and it didn't stitch together the parts of ourselves they broke. It only gave us space to feel the pain more clearly. There were no parades, no songs, just silence and the sound of people not knowing where to go. Some tried to go back to lands where their mothers had been taken, back to trees they once climbed, but the land didn't remember them. The people there didn't welcome them. Others stayed close to the fields, not because they wanted to, but because they didn't know anything else. That's what happens when you're raised in a cage. You forget how to stretch your wings, even when the door is open. I wandered for a long time, from town to town, field to field, looking for work, for kindness, for something that felt real. I found good people here and there, but I also found eyes that still looked at me like I didn't belong. Freedom didn't change that. Laws changed, maybe, but hearts are slower. I slept in barns, in sheds, sometimes under the stars when the sky wasn't too cruel. I worked where I could, doing what I knew, picking, lifting, mending. My hands never forgot labor. They knew how to bleed. I saw others trying to build lives, families, small houses on borrowed land, and though I was glad for them, I never stayed long. I carried something inside me that made it hard to rest. Guilt, maybe, or a longing too deep for the world to reach. I used to sit alone and imagine what she would look like now. My sister, grown, would she have children? Would her voice be soft like mama's or strong like papa's? Would she still laugh the way she used to, with her head thrown back and her eyes shut tight? I pictured her in every face I saw, and in every face that wasn't hers. I felt the emptiness deepen. Once, I thought I found her in a market, in a dusty town with no name. A woman stood by the well, braids falling over her shoulders, humming a tune that struck something in me. I walked slowly, afraid to believe. I said her name, quietly. She turned, looked at me, but it wasn't her, just a kind face with kind eyes. She asked if I needed something. I shook my head and walked away, my chest hollow and aching. That happened more times than I care to say. Little moments when I let hope rise, only to bury it again. I stopped looking after a while, not because I stopped caring, but because each false moment felt like losing her all over again. I kept moving, I kept breathing, but it wasn't life, not the kind they write about in books or sing about in church. It was just a string of days, tied together by memory. Sometimes I helped bury the dead. I said their names out loud, even if I didn't know them, because I knew what it meant to vanish without a name. I made sure someone heard them once before the dirt covered them. It was the only way I knew how to honor the living. I watched the world change, slowly, in pieces. I saw people stand up and speak truth, even when it cost them everything. I admired them. But I never had the fire for that. My fire was smaller, quieter. Just staying alive was the flame I kept lit. Freedom came, yes, but peace never did. Not for me, not fully, because freedom without justice is just another word. And freedom without reunion is just another kind of grief. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want riches. All I ever wanted was to find her, just once, to see her eyes, to tell her I never stopped looking. I've lived longer than I expected to, longer than many I once knew. The names of some I worked beside have faded like carvings in old wood, and the faces of others visit me only in sleep. But one face has never left me. One memory has never loosened its grip. My mother. I never learned what happened to her, whether she lived a year or many, whether she ever found peace, whether she ever stopped looking for me. And that not knowing became part of who I am, a silence louder than any word. I spent my life carrying that silence, walking beside it like a shadow I couldn't shake. I've been called many things. I've had names put on me, taken from me, forgotten by others. But in my heart, I was always her son. Her blood runs in me like a river that never dries. Her strength kept me upright when the world wanted me to bend. Her last look gave me reason when everything else tried to take it. I never had children of my own. Maybe because the world took so much from me that I didn't think I had anything left to give. But this story, this memory, that is what I leave behind. That is my child. That is what I offer the world. Not because I want pity. I don't. I want remembrance. I want someone, somewhere, to carry this story forward so that her voice echoes again through time, so that she is not forgotten. I tell this not to reopen old wounds, but to show that even when everything is taken from you, memory can survive. Even when a name is stolen, love can remain. Even when a boy becomes a shadow, a mother's look can keep his soul lit. I've sat alone most nights, but I've never truly been alone. She's always been with me, in the wind, in the smoke, in the stars. And now, as my hands grow tired and my voice begins to slow, I feel the time coming when I must rest. But I leave this with you, the one who listened, because if you heard me, really heard me, then she lives on. I am her living memory, and now, maybe, you are too. I used to wonder if memory could outlive a lifetime, if stories whispered on cold nights could become more than just pain. I no longer wonder, I believe. I've seen it. In the way others sit quietly when I speak, in the way their eyes fill not with tears, but with recognition. Somewhere, deep inside, they know what it means to lose something that never returned, to wait, to carry love like a secret fire. That's what she gave me, not just life, but the strength to remember even when the world tried to make me forget. I don't remember her hands anymore. I don't remember the way she walked, but I remember her silence. I remember her presence, like warmth on my back when I was cold and had no fire. That's what I hold. That's what I've become. I am what remains when the body is gone, but the soul refuses to leave. I am the whisper in the wind that says, we were here, we lived, we loved, we lost, but we did not vanish. I hope that when I am gone, someone will sit by a fire and leave a chair empty for me, not to fill with words, but with presence, not with sorrow, but with memory. Because that's all we ever truly leave behind, those quiet traces that say, I was here and I mattered. If my story touched something in you, subscribe and keep listening through the playlist. Let her voice carry farther than mine ever could.